On January 29, 2018, the Chilean president, Michelle Bachelet, and Kristen Tompkins, on behalf of Tompkins Conservation, made history as they declared Conservation Patagonia to be Chile's newest IUCN-recognized Category 2 national park. You may be wondering why Patagonia. There's two main reasons why the park was chosen: for its ecological importance and its political importance. First, we'll talk about the ecological aspect. The park exists in a transition zone from the semi-arid Patagonian steppe to the temperate forest of Nires, meaning it is rare compared to other parks in the sense that it covers such a wide and infrequent variety of habitats. From grasslands and wetlands to high peaks, these diverse habitats not only create a critical space for species to adapt to changing climates, but they also lack the necessary protection they need on a global scale. This area also contains one of the largest surviving populations of an endangered species, the huemul deer. The political importance also plays a big aspect in the creation of this park. The main valley of the park consists of an area called Chacabuco Valley. CONAF, the agency in charge of Chilean parks, listed this area as a top conservation priority over 30 years ago. But until recently, the organization has lacked the funds to purchase the privately owned land outright. That all changed in 2004 when Kristen Tompkins, on behalf of Tompkins Conservation, purchased the 173,000-acre valley. Tompkins Conservation believes that Patagonia is one of the last truly wild places left on Earth, and they hope the parks they are creating will protect this area. Their mission is to save and restore wildlands and wildlife, inspire care for the natural world, and generate healthy economic opportunities for local communities. While the purchase was well intended, that does not mean that it went without contest. The central valley to the park, Chacabuco Valley, has been a working sheep ranch for years. Established just over a century ago, Patagonia has always had a history of self-reliance and pioneer culture. A big aspect of this way of life is based on the process of raising and consuming locally grown livestock. The formation of the park, however, and restorations of the wildlands called for the removal of the livestock and farms in the area. While Tompkins Conservation did offer jobs to many local residents, those residents that did not want to work for the conservation were left without jobs and land. Even some of the locals who did decide to work for the conservation still have their issues with it. Many people feel that the park has erased the human history of the valley and are replacing it with foreign customs, values, and people. Part of the mission statement of the Conservation Patagonia webpage states that their goal is to generate healthy economic opportunities for local communities. And although they have not entirely succeeded in this endeavor, they continue to work hard to find new ways to create a place where both the local communities and wildlife in Patagonia can coexist happily. There are many direct threats to Patagonia National Park. One includes threatened species, for example, the huemul deer, which is critically endangered, only having around 2,000 left in their population. Another example is the proposed hydroelectric megadams, which would ultimately change the course of the Baker and Pasuca rivers and fragment the wildlife who inhabit the area. One final example of direct threats in the area is overgrazing and desertification. Around the 19th to 20th century, European settlers brought sheep over to this area and have since ranched here. Over the years, these sheep have primarily been used for their wool and meat. Overgrazing and poorly executed stalking patterns of sheep in the Patagonian area have caused around 150 years of unsustainable grazing. Now, over 90% of Patagonia's land suffers from some degree of degraded soils, and this desertification problem is one of the most urgent ecological threats this area is facing. Some examples of indirect threats from overgrazing and desertification include private landowners who own about 90% of the land, which makes it hard to control grazing throughout the area. Strong winds throughout the land, as well as cold winters, contribute to the increasing desertification as well. Finally, underlying causes to this threat include the demand for wool, causing there to be the need for land to graze sheep on, as well as competition across the globe for the production of wool. Another underlying cause is the resistance the park has received from local people who do not want to sacrifice their history and traditions for the sake of the park. The Nature Conservancy's New Patagonia Grasslands of Argentina Conservation Project is coordinating efforts to bring scientists together with land managers to develop a sustainable grazing model that will allow farmers to continue grazing sheep while also allowing the land to recover. This is one example of how the park has chosen to manage the overgrazing and desertification in the area. However, these decisions lay solely in the hands of property owners. Conservation efforts are also bringing in volunteers to remove the existing fences and various invasive species, hoping that this will help contribute to the land being returned to its natural state. Overall, efforts to protect this area and restore it to its once beautiful self can be divided into 3 categories: habitat restoration, recovering threatened species, and protecting biodiversity. By applying these 3 categories, Conservation Patagonia hopes to restore these lands.
Given the major threats to Patagonia National Park, it is important to explore some of the different management principles behind the threats. The first management principle states that threatening processes will be diminished when PAs are managed as part of a community effort to achieve conservation outcomes at a landscape level. So, by connecting two existing parks and including ranchers and community members in the management process, the park can further preserve biodiversity and species population. The next management principle relies heavily on community education to combat the threats. As we know, the biggest threat to Patagonia National Park is ranching and desertification. So by educating ranchers and concerned citizens, there might be an opportunity to change behaviors and perceptions behind land use. The third principle that will aid in effective management of the park are environmental planning processes that would allow Patagonians to economically benefit from the park while ensuring that any use of resources in the area would be sustainable. The idea behind private protected area ownership is a relatively new concept in the world of conservation, so the creation of this park is a very exciting start towards future endeavors that will protect areas of high biodiversity. Although they have not been completely successful in all aspects, the Tompkins have still provided many new strategies and practices to the world of private protected area ownership.